Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Money Mike, and this is the Front 7 podcast. As we are now a week away from the NFL season, and man, oh man, dude, it felt like it took longer this year to get to this start of the new season. And with everything going on, obviously, everything felt longer this year. But you know what? We finally get something good out of this year. The NFL season starts next week, next Thursday. The Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champions, play host to the Houston Texans in a playoff rematch. Then, of course, you got all the exciting games for week one. And I'll get more into that probably next week in my predictions video. So today I will be discussing the top stories, in my opinion, as we head into the start of the new season. And make sure that if you like this video, that subscribe for more of the Front 7 podcast, as I will be talking the latest news throughout the NFL season as the road to Tampa Super Bowl 55 kicks off next Thursday. But let's go ahead and get started on what I believe are the top stories heading into this new season. And if you think I left something out, go ahead and leave a comment below, and let's have a discussion about it. So obviously, when you look at what's been going on recently, where, college football is like so mixed. We did have college football start up last week, but everything is so mixed because you have conferences that are playing, some aren't playing. It's so jumbled, and you have players that are opting out. So, I think the big question here is, how will this impact the 2021 draft, just from a perspective of, are we going to see less underclassmen declare for the draft compared to the usual amount? Because usually each year we do get a good amount of underclassmen that do declare for the draft and turn pro. With everything that has happened this year, are we going to see less of that? So it's going to be interesting to see if the draft class in 2021 is going to actually be kind of less than normal, is going to be impacted just from not having as many players as we are accustomed to having in and eligible for the draft. It's put up or shut up time for Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. Now, we've seen their fellow 2018 draft class members, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. They've taken their team to the playoffs. Lamar obviously did what he did last year, lighting up, taking the NFL world by storm. But, right now, when you look at what happened last year, the Browns were supposed to take the next step. That did not happen. They were still the same old Browns. With a new head coach, once again, Kevin Stefanski from the Vikings, installing there what they want to do. I would imagine it's going to be very similar to what the Vikings did and how they were successful in these last couple of years. They went out and they improved their offensive line. They brought in, they brought in a great offensive line coach. They went out and they improved it. And to me, right now, I think it's put up or shut up. I mean, Baker Mayfield has Odell Beckham. You have Jarvis Landry. They brought in Austin Hooper. To me, they have the pieces in place. You have Nick Chubb you can hand the ball off to. You know, the 2018 draft class, they are now going into their third year. Next year will be their fourth year in 2021, and then of course the fifth year option will have to be decided upon for 2022. And the Jets did the same thing. The Jets went out, they improved their offensive line. They did. They went out and got some weapons for Darnold. Again, when you look at what Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have done for the Ravens and the Bills, I think it's now or never for Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, who now have to use this year and next year to prove to the Jets and the Browns that they are the future of they are the franchise quarterbacks of those teams. Because if not, we could be looking at a situation where perhaps Baker Mayfield, where the Browns and the Jets are looking for a new quarterback again. Just again, I mean, look, they got their fifth year option coming up. The teams are going to have to decide on if they're going to pick it up, and it's now they've been giving the tools to succeed. Now it's time to put that to work. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold have to step up this year. They have to show to the Browns, to the Jets, that they can be the future of the franchise. Otherwise, both of those teams will be looking for quarterbacks in the 2022-2023 NFL Draft. Because this is where things get interesting, because Dak Prescott right now, he did not sign a new deal with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, it's been rumored of how much money he's turned down. Now, if Jerry Jones, if Dak does have a great year, let's say they have a good playoff run under Mike McCarthy, perhaps they make it to the NFC Championship game. I mean, let's look at Dak Prescott's stats from last year, and you'll see them up here on the screen. 65.1 completion percentage, 4,902 yards, 30 touchdowns to only 11 interceptions. I mean, what if Dak goes out this year and has a similar season or even a better season, and the Cowboys have, they go on a deep playoff run, or even make the Super Bowl, and Dak kind of just, bet it on himself. Is Jerry Jones ready to pay Dak? Because to me, he's on the tag this year. Are they going to tag him again? We saw in Washington where, they didn't want to pay Kirk Cousins, so they tagged him twice before letting him go, and he signed with the Vikings, eventually as a free agent. But the Redskins tagged him twice beforehand. Is that going to be similar here with Dak, where Dallas is just going to handcuff him with the franchise tag 2 years in a row before letting him be a free agent in 2022? And Dallas saying, you know what? All right, look, we're not going to pay him this much money. Let's go out and get ourselves a rookie quarterback with, cheaper option over 5 years, blah blah blah, things like that. To me right now, this is going to be the key to the success of Dallas in this decade. Because if they let that go, what is their plan B? What is their plan B if Dak says, you know what, look, you're not giving me the money I want. I'm gonna go somewhere else, and some other team is going to pay me what I want, and I'm gonna go get paid what I think I'm worth by another team. Good luck with whatever you do. I'm gonna go play for this team. So again, I think right now the success of the Cowboys going into this new decade of NFL football will solely depend on what happens between Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys in March next year. Because if he gets the tag again after having another great year, is there going to be a long-term deal next summer before the tag deadline, or is that going to be forced to play on back-to-back tags again? I never understood why the NFLPA negotiated negotiated a new labor agreement without doing something that changes the franchise tag usage. Because obviously, if Dallas can just tag him again next year, or if they would have worked something out in this new labor deal that said you can only tag a player once, then that would put pressure on these teams to get a deal done. Or at the very, very least, it would at least get them to say, you know what, okay, if we're really not going to pay them the money, then we'll just not tag them at all. We'll just let them be a free agent, take the third round compensatory pick, and move on. That's it, right? So, to me, again, the success of Dallas is going to depend on whether or not Dak Prescott is in the cards for the Dallas Cowboys in the future. If you guys have heard the phrase, anybody who for those who watch NBA, you guys heard the phrase, trust the process. All right. So trust the process was this whole thing with the 76ers where they were basically tanking. They were tanking for a good lottery pick to try to build a team over time. And essentially, well, I mean, that didn't really work out the way that they thought. But obviously, with the NBA, with only 5 players on a court, compared to, say, 11 guys on an offense for football, obviously there's a greater impact where if you tank for a better lottery pick in the NBA, and let's say you do have the number one pick, and you get this once in a lifetime player that's going to come in and just completely change your whole entire franchise, then yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So the 76ers tried this. Obviously it didn't work. They just fired their head coach. But we saw what Miami did. Miami last year, they traded off a bunch of players. They released a lot of guys. And they said, you know what, we're tanking for a quarterback in 2020. Now, obviously, nobody saw what Joe Burrow did coming. Obviously, hit the season that he had last year for LSU was incredible. Nobody saw it coming. I mean, I think before the season, I think he was only a third or fourth round prospect. And then he went out there and had this great year, and then he's all of a sudden the number 1 overall pick. It did help that Tua got hurt, and that affected his draft stock a little bit, but not too much. But the whole concessions was Miami was tanking for Tua, and they were going to get the number 1 overall pick. They were losing games on purpose. And what if? I mean, look, I'm not saying that Miami is going to go out there and win a Super Bowl this year. All right. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if over time, let's say over time, Miami is winning, and they're a winning franchise under Tua, and Tua was a product of a tanking method where the Dolphins were able to, they're not going to admit they were losing the games on purpose, but essentially, they were losing them. Basically, they traded off a bunch of players, losing depth on their team, trying to get a high draft pick. So, obviously they did win some games, but the whole thing here, what I'm saying is, is this going to lead to more tanking? Will the Tampa Bay Buccaneers be the first team to ever play the Super Bowl on their home turf? So for those who don't know, there's a Super Bowl host curse that seemingly happens to every team that hosts the Super Bowl that year. We have not seen a host team, a team that hosted the Super Bowl play in that Super Bowl. Obviously, with what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done in this offseason, where they acquired Tom Brady, they traded for Rob Gronkowski, and when you add Rob Gronkowski to Mike Evans, to Chris Godwin, the Buccaneers have a great offense. And now you have Tom Brady at quarterback. So I think, to me, Tampa is going to kind of put an end to things. I think Tampa Bay is going to push it in terms of, potentially getting there and being the first team to play the Super Bowl on their home turf. I think that's going to be the big story in the NFC all season, is especially if Tom Brady goes out there and he's throwing, he's back to his normal self. He's not what he was last year, which I think will be the case, because I do believe a lot of Tom Brady last year was due to the lack of weapons. Obviously, Antonio Brown, he went crazy. Josh Gordon, he can't stay off the weed, and he didn't have the weapons. Gronkowski had retired. He didn't have the weapons that he's normally accustomed to, which I think kind of hurt the production a little bit for Brady last year. I think now you put him in a situation where he has Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, you have Gronkowski. I think you are, and also OJ Howard. Don't forget about him either. They could run some two tight end sets that New England used to do with Gronkowski and Hernandez. So that could be a possibility. But that is going to be a story to watch all year. Will Tampa Bay be the first team to play in the Super Bowl on their home turf? Kyler Murray getting a big boost, taking advantage of Bill O'Brien's stupidity. The Cardinals adding DeAndre Hopkins to the mix there at receiver. I think, to me, Kyler Murray is going to take the next step. But I think Kyler Murray will be fine in that retrospect. But, when we're talking about the other members of the 2019 class, can Dwayne Haskins, Daniel Jones, can they step up to the plate and step up and show that they are the future in Washington and in New York? The very same thing with Jacksonville. Obviously, they traded Nick Foles away. They saw something they liked with Gardner Minshew and said, you know what, we're going to give him the reins. Let's see what happens. You know, if we lose a whole bunch of games, then we'll draft Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. But obviously, the coaching staff is committed to Minshew magic. And honestly, I mean, I'll save a little bit more for my predictions next week. But I want you to look at the stat here, or the stat sheet for Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew had a 60.6 completion percentage. He threw for 3,271 yards with a 21 touchdown to 6 interception ratio. I mean, to me, I think a lot of people in the media, they're overlooking that. They're focused on Murray, they're focused on Daniel Jones, and obviously Dwayne Haskins. But when you look at Gardner Minshew, I think, maybe because he plays for Jacksonville, and Jacksonville doesn't get a lot of media coverage, being in a small market, but when you look at those stats for Minshew last year, I mean, look, Kyler Murray threw 20 touchdowns, Minshew 21 touchdowns. So obviously, Minshew was able to perform in a way that, even though he didn't have a lot of talent around him, I mean, they got DJ Chark, but even though there wasn't a whole lot of talent around him, for him to still go out there, and they even benched him again. When Nick Foles came back from his injury, they went back to Foles, and then they went back to Minshew. But Minshew did show a glimpse that said, you know what, we are comfortable, that the Jaguars were comfortable enough to trade Nick Foles and give Minshew a shot as the full-time starter. Run the Lamar, nevermore. Obviously, Lamar Jackson lit up the NFL. He went out there with his blazing speed. He's breaking ankles all over the place. But obviously, can that be sustainable? Because maybe to Lamar, maybe Lamar, is that going to be sustainable? Can Lamar keep that up? But what I want to know is, I go back to a quote from Lamar earlier this year where he's talked about running less. He wants to throw more. And again, let's go back to the stats from last year. Look, Lamar Jackson had, obviously, his running, it lit up the NFL. Everybody was saying, oh my gosh, he's a great runner, and look at the way he runs, and look at all these great, amazing runs. But Lamar Jackson led the league in passing touchdowns. Like, everybody's talking about what he can do with his legs, but they're completely forgetting that he led the league in passing touchdowns last year. 36 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. 3,127 yards. I mean, look, he only did 3,100 yards, but I mean, look, I think Lamar, I think Lamar wants to go out there and prove that he's just not a running quarterback. I think, for him to say that he wants to run less, I think we're going to still see design plays for Lamar to run and do his thing that we saw last year. But I think Lamar, and I think even maybe for the Ravens, I think they want to go out there and show that Lamar can pass the ball. Obviously he can. He led the league in passing touchdowns last year. So, will Lamar succeed while running less? That's the big question. Obviously, you lose Marshall Yanda to a long-time Ravens guard to retirement. Is the offensive line going to miss a step because of that? They brought in DJ Fluker. Is he going to be able to replace Yanda at guard? Um, so many things where it's like, can the Ravens sustain it? Sustain the running game? Will lack of preseason hurt the quality of games in 2020? Um, so obviously, with the preseason in recent years, we've seen teams. A couple years ago, when the Rams went to the Super Bowl, the Rams that preseason bench there, they did not play a single starter the entire preseason. Obviously now preseason kind of, teams don't play their starters as much. They keep them rested for the regular season. But of course, because of that, that's led to some sloppiness early on, where we do see the quality of the games kind of impacted because of the lack of chemistry, the lack of playing time heading into the regular season. Obviously, with everything that's happened this year, and there being no preseason, is that going to have a greater impact on the quality of games? We'll find out next week when the Chiefs play the Texans. But I mean, I think, to me, what we're going to see this year is teams with new head coaches, new coaching staffs. I think they're going to struggle more so compared to teams with established coaches, established coaching staffs, established players. I think, are established starters basically. Where we're going to see where, the lack of an off season kind of did hurt teams that were transitioning to a new coaching staff. And I do think that we might see that translate in the first couple weeks of the season, where there was no game, like in-game time for starters to get accustomed to to be on the field in an in-game scenario. Can the Kansas City Chiefs repeat as Super Bowl champions? Now, we've had no team repeat in 10 plus years. The last team to repeat as Super Bowl champions were the New England Patriots. And the Kansas City Chiefs just locked in Andy Reid and general manager Brett Veach to new 6-year contracts. So, Mahomes is locked in for the next 10 years, next 12, 13 years. Travis Kelce is locked in. The Kansas City Chiefs are set to make a dynasty. And the question is, can they repeat? We have not seen that. And obviously the Chiefs, they're returning I think 21 of 22 starters, which is unheard of in this day of free agency, where a lot of team free agents will be like, you know what, we're going to go, they'll leave the Super Bowl team, take a lot of money to go play elsewhere for a big wad of cash, but, play for a team that's not a Super Bowl contender, miss the playoffs, but they'll still have all that money. And, if you look at what Sammy Watkins said earlier in the offseason, hey, why would I why would I take a pay cut? Why would I risk being cut from here, knowing it's a good situation, and go take a boatload of money to go play somewhere else when I'm in a good situation as it is? Obviously, Sammy Watkins, he restructured his contract this year. Earlier in the offseason to stay with the team. He was in danger of being cut. So again, a player with common sense. He was like, you know what? Why would I go take a pay cut, or why would I risk being cut, going playing for a team who might not be a playoff contender, when I can stay here and help build a dynasty in Kansas City? So, to me, I think it's a real possibility. I think, you're returning 21 to 22. Maybe, I think it's 20 or 22. I don't know the exact number. But the Chiefs are returning basically all their starters. And, I mean, to me, I think they're most set up to have a dynasty, to be the next dynasty. And with everybody locked into big long-term deals, I think, this being the number one story for me as we close out the show. Can the Chiefs repeat as Super Bowl champions? Absolutely. But, is there going to be a team that's going to come around and going to go, and you know what? A team like the Ravens are going to say, you know what? Hey, it's our turn. And beat the Chiefs, and the Ravens go to the Super Bowl. Is there going to be a team that maybe that's going to surprise us? Like the Tennessee Titans did last year, where they came out of nowhere. They beat the Ravens. And they figured out how to stop Lamar. And they went all the way to the AFC title game. And almost, at one point they were leading the Chiefs in the AFC title game. But, is there going to be a team that's going to pull a shocker like the Titans did, that could upset everything, and upset everything that we know of, or that we thought we knew? So, leave a comment below if you think I missed anything here. These were my top 10 stories for this upcoming season, where I thought, these were the top 10 stories heading into the year. And if you think I missed something, leave a comment down below. I've been your host, Money Mike. I will be back with a new Front 7 podcast next week. As in honor of Super Bowl 55, I will have 55 predictions for the 2020 NFL season. And yes, I said next week because I'm going to need the whole week to come up with 55 predictions. So, if you liked the video, subscribe for more content here on this channel. I will have more podcasts of wrestling coming up soon. But with the start of the NFL season being next week, I will be focusing a lot more on the Front 7. So subscribe for that.